not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Hey, Joe, your mic's not muted because I can hear you coughing.
Jeff, you there? And unmute.
Yeah.
How are you guys? Welcome to Hog-n-out, guys. Glad to have everybody here. I know we just started. Good attendance so far. I appreciate you guys. Jeff, the last interview we had was about 3 months ago, and we talked about the breeding process, the breeding cycle of the hognose snake. Now, watching that back today, I noticed that we really talked more so about the brumation. And you talked about the hognoses in nature, what they do, so on and so forth. We really didn't touch on too many points when it comes to after brumation. And of course, I've been talking to you in the last few weeks about that. Of course, I'm going through that experience right now after brumation. I've been bothering your ass. I told you. I said, listen, why don't we just do a podcast and just get it out in public and do what we got to do. And last night, we're both tired. I know your live streams are kicking ass, bro, on Instagram, dude. I've been watching them for the last, 3-4 weeks now. When did you start that on Instagram, your live feeds, feeding your hognoses?
In December, I was going through and feeding newly set up baby hognose. And I thought it would be interesting to do a live. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do a live, I was like, I should do one where I'm going to be available for a long time. I was like, I'm going to be very available while trying to offer all these baby hognose the very first feedings. And I was like, I thought this would be a really good one or a really good one to, or a good thing to do to interact with people if they had any questions, especially because that's probably my number one question is about feeding hognose, especially babies. And so I started and I kind of didn't realize, I didn't know too much about lives or doing lives. I didn't know I could have saved them and post them at first. Yeah. Now, there's been some pretty crazy ones. The ones where it's not really, I don't think it's really that important if I post this one. But it would have been nice if I made a series because those first ones that the first few I made, they were the literal first times those baby hognose were ever offered meals, the second and third time. And I think I think they were very good lives as far as showing a really strong or a good method for offering baby hognose meals for the first time and, ways to effectively get them started eating because I did lives. I only missed, I think, a lot, like doing 2 lives for feeding all of my baby hognose. Other than that, I've done a live for all of these ones that hatched out in like December and stuff. I pretty much captured every offering, most of the offerings on the live videos. Maybe I missed like 3.
Yeah, like what I love about your live stream is a lot of people have been asking you, and you've been doing actually on camera on your live streams, is assist feeding. I'm like, your method is pretty fast, pretty clean. It seems like there's not too much stress, I should say.
No, and, you do it quick, and then I do. Yeah, I do it PEX, so it's like basically a small bit of like a whole prey, diet for them. So that's just not like a little bit of a mouse. It's enough to actually give them energy and to actually maintain body weight and muscle mass.
And it's the pinky heads you use, right? Pinky heads.
Yeah, use pinky heads.
Yeah, that's great, dude. I love watching his live feeds, dude. I love trolling you, by the way, like I did last night.
Well, that's what's fun about him too is it's a pretty good mix of people that actually come in pretty regularly.
Oh, they're great, dude. It's great interaction, dude. I love it. It's really good.
So it's great. I really like the people that come in regularly and talk shit or just just mess with us.
It's not too much talking shit, but we do once in a while. But
a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot of good questions. The last
great questions, man. Great questions.
Yeah, a lot of really good questions. I felt like the last one, because I said at one point, I was like, this live isn't good, and I think some people took that as like I meant more the way I answering
the
questions.
way you did it. Yeah,
it's me. It wasn't to do anybody with to do with anybody else, but. The questions were really good, and then that live though went for like too long. I did a full 4 hours, and then I did an additional one, which was like 2 hours when my phone died, and then I started up again. And there's a bunch of rants. There's probably about 30% of it wasn't even related to hognose, other than that I was in the room feeding hognose.
Yeah, I love the questions. I love your old man reading the questions, man, because he butchers them a little bit.
He'll make up questions too.
Oh, he's great, dude. He's great. I love it. I love watching your old man do with you, man. It's really fucking awesome interaction, man. And it's great family business, man. I really do love watching the live streams, dude. Every time you go live, man, I'm like, let me check out Jeff, dude. I'm not working right now, so I have the time to do so. So it's great. But in this chat here, Jeff, I want to talk about what should we do when it comes to our hog noses, being first-time breeder, somebody's been breeding Hognose for maybe a couple years, 3 years, maybe somebody that's been doing it for a decade. I'm like, you've been doing it for decades now. What I want to ask you is, let's start with bringing our Hognoses out of brumation. We're bringing them out of brumation, right? You would say keeping them in brumation minimal 2 months, right? You say, I think you said in the last interview, maybe 3, maybe even 4 months is okay, but the minimal would be 2 months. That's what I did. So you want to expand on that a little bit, and then I want to talk about temperatures, bringing them out of brumation after that. All right. So.
Yeah.
About brumation
Well, one thing is, I mean, there's really no set exact time where it says, hey, your success is going to be much greater at this point, and that, you know, nobody's ever taken like, say, like a sample size of, say, like another thing is too, you know, you could cool, say, like 100 female hognose and then 100 female hognose from like, you know, at a different year, and your season might not be as good. But those years you may have had like different, you know, cool down periods for the females, and that may or may not have affected them. I like to do 2 months because it's actually a relatively short period of time for them to be in brumation, especially compared to like what they'd experienced in the wild. But it's enough where you know that their body's going to have that innate instinctual understanding that, you know, they went through brumation, and then the spring-like spring-like temperatures that you're simulating when they're coming out of brumation is going to you know, cause them to produce egg follicles and everything. So,
good.
Yeah, it's just that you know, there's no set period that says this method's going to be like, you know, or this time period is going to be way better than another. But I think 2 months is a really good minimum amount of time for brumation. But sometimes I'll do 3 months.
But when we talked about this a few weeks ago, you stated to me like, hey, listen, Joe, when it comes to hognoses in the nature, like it might be like 3, 4, 5 months. But what we're doing right now, when we do 2 months, we're speeding up the process. So when we talk about the ovulation cycle or the shed cycle, you said to me, Joe, don't wait for that. Don't wait for the 4 weeks because we're speeding up the process a little bit. So you want to pair them a little bit quicker within the first week or two after coming out of brumation, after they warm up a little bit. And we're going to talk about temperatures too. So the temperatures you told me, which I was really stupid about because I was going to jack those temperatures up to like, you know, 90, 93, 94 degrees on the warm side. You said, no, Joe, 86 to 88 warm side, keep it there after brumation, pair them, and just keep it there until, of course, you know, they lay the eggs, and of course you do your egg box and all that. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that little period right there of bringing them out of brumation, temperature-wise, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, the thing is when they're in brumation too, they're kind of in like you know, their metabolisms really slow down, and they're almost like in a state of suspension as far as their, you know, activity and everything, you know, if you have them cold enough. So when you warm them up, you know, again, like I don't really actually do it too gradually, but when I warm them up, I just put them at like, you know, it's kind of like say if they're at 55 degrees, I'll put them somewhere where it's like, you know, low 70s and like for a couple days. And then after that, I move them right to the rack. And you don't want to put the heat on them really like intensely, you know, right away, because for one, you can kill the male sperm count a bit if the male's like too hot and just sitting on that like hot spot constantly. And then you're just speeding up the whole process. That's what I mean about speeding up the process. It's not so much the short brumation period. It's really the temperatures we're keeping them at. Because in the wild, when they come out of brumation, there's still some erratic temperature, you know, changes and stuff that are still happening. And the days are still, you know, becoming longer, and there's still a lot of like, you know, really cold night drops. Even in the areas in Southwest Texas, they still can, you know, get down to like 40s or 50s sometimes in the springtime. And, you know, as the days expand and get longer and longer, they have more time to, you know, thermoregulate, warm up, and then get to the point where they're actually eating. Because in the wild, it's pretty evident that most of these hognose are actually breeding post-brumation before they're even eating. But I like to feed mine a couple meals, though, before I even pair them, just so they have more nutrients and everything to develop egg follicles. And that's more important for the females, not the males. If your male's like, because you asked me a question about your male.
Yes, I did, yeah. And we're going to go into that here in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. If your male has like good weight, body weight, and he's not eating yet really out of brumation, you can go ahead and breed him. Because naturally in the wild, that's what they would do. And they don't eat that frequently in the wild, especially post-brumation. They shouldn't be, especially the ones in the more central and northern regions because the temperatures are usually still too cold at
Still
that
cold,
time.
yeah. So yeah, I'm like, that's what you said to me is like, you know, I asked you last night, and that's why I paired Rosie and Jeff last night. Is Jeff's been eating pretty good. He already ate one big meal, so that was last week. And I asked you, I'm like, hey Jeff, listen, Rosie hasn't eaten. She has great, massive structure. She looks really beefy. She hasn't eaten since October 8th. I'm like, but she's still beefy. I'm like, but she ate like a champ like months before. Like she was eating like medium mice like once a week, and she like really still looks like to this day, like after they were pairing or after they locked up today, she beefy. And you're like, yeah, listen, Joe, pair them now. See if they pair. If they pair, then you get offer a meal the day after, because that might entice her to start feeding. And what do you think about that? So after you,
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
pair, yeah. So after you pair, if the female has not fed after a week and a half, which is 12 days, and you said, Joe, don't worry about it, just get them pairing, get that sperm in her, because they reserve that sperm, and after that, it might entice her. It should entice her to start feeding within a day or two, right?
Yeah, and just being bred will a lot of times spur the female to develop their body to respond to develop egg follicles. And then in response to that, their body is going to want more nutrients. So then their appetite should really pick up. So that's and that's basically the formula for actually breeding females that haven't been cooled down. Because if you are breeding them like kind of within the season, and as the female's body is becoming mature and the female has ample nutrients, and you breed her, a lot of times just being bred, that stimulation and that hormonal response to the female having been bred and then also storing sperm inside her
should pick up their metabolism a little bit.
Yeah, it tells their body too that they're that they have the proper
something's
nutrients
going on, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then they're also the proper maturity and size to develop egg follicles, and then that's their body will respond to being bred by developing egg follicles, and then ovulate, and then the process goes on from there. The gestation period then starts at that point, and so that's another thing we're going to talk about too, like gestation, because people ask me about that.
Yeah. We'll get
like, hey, I've heard of Hognose being bred and they lay 2 months later. It's like, well, their ovulation from the time their egg follicles are mature to ovulating to laying, it's like right around a month. It's like, It depends. Actually, the higher the temperature, the faster they're actually going to develop and metabolize. So if your Hognose at a really high temperature, they can probably lay in about like 28, 29 days post ovulation. That's how long it will take for the gestation period for those eggs to be mature to, and ready to be laid.
Now, not to cut you off, but you recommend a temperature when it comes to ovulation of between 86 to 88. Is that your best experience?
Like mid-80s,
like 85, 86.
84 to 88 is okay. 88's a little slightly on the high side, but I still think pretty acceptable.
Yeah, mine's been at 88 for both of them, so maybe I'll knock them down. So I've been using heat lamps.
Oh, you're fine.
But I can raise them up and down, so it's no big deal.
Pretty quickly, so that's the thing too. Once they've been bred, then I bump the temperatures up and everything, because then they need to start really digesting the meals. But even at 88, that's a pretty reasonable temperature just to keep them at, even post breeding and as you're feeding them more, because that's an ample enough hot spot for them to digest full meals.
To be honest with you, I'm like Rosie. She'll go on the cool side, dude, where it's like 75, 76, and she'll just sit there overnight and then come back in the heat lamp in the morning. It's weird.
Yeah, that's what they'll do that too. I mean, it's funny. I'll feed my baby Hognose big meals, and they'll be for a long period of time on the cool side, and then they'll be on their hot spot for a good like 4, 5, 8 hours sometimes. Sometimes only a few hours, and then they go to so they know what their body's doing. They know how to thermoregulate where it's like what's best for processing the meal.
It is crazy, dude, watching them do when it comes to heat, because I'll put my heating pad on at night like I did when they locked up last night, Rosie and Jeff. Like I shut the heating lamp off, but I have a heating pad on the warm side too as well. And I actually got my thermal infrared, and I just tested it all night long. It was like 65 or 80, 85, 86. And I was just like, that's great.
Okay.
And that's when they start locking up in that area. I just kept it there, all night, all morning, and it just worked perfect. And I was like, this is great. So, and they locked up pretty quick, man, within like 10 hours, 8 hours. So
good.
And they locked up for 5.5 hours, dude. 5.5 hours lockup, man. So
that's a good on those too. They lock up for quite a while, more so than like say like a corn snake or like milk snake or king snake. A lot of my Hognose, they lock up for a few hours.
One question I want to ask you when it comes to lockup, I'm like, I've read like where, oh, you should let your Hognose lock up at least twice, within the first 2 or 3 weeks. Now, when you get one good lockup, all right, say you lock up for like, in my case, 5 hours, 5.5 hours. Now, what's that tell you when it comes to the lockup? Does that tell you that you might have a second clutch? Is it more sperm? Is it, is that good when you have a longer lockup?
I like to
I
see
think it's
the
a good
longer
question.
lockups.
So,
Yeah, I don't see any correlation though between shorter lockup and longer lockup with strength of fertility. But I actually had one hognose lock up for maybe only like an hour, and the female had a perfect clutch. And I thought because that was like a very short lockup. That's very short. Most of my hognose are locking up for like 2 to 6 hours. That's pretty common. And I've had some that locked up. My longest lock ever was like 12 hours. Because I remember I was leaving, it was like around 8 a.m. and I checked them and they were locked up. And when I got back and everything and I checked on things, they were still locked up. And then around like 8, 9, they were still pretty much locked up. And I didn't even really know if they locked up right at 8. So they may have been locked up for like 13 hours. And it's funny because these are really small male. But I haven't seen really any correlation between fertility. But the nice thing is, though, with any of those locks, whether it be a 1 or 2 hour lock or a 4 or 6 hour lock, you got a really good breeding in there.
Good,
and then, it was, very successful. And at that point, I actually removed the male and I just focus on feeding the female and then supplementing her food. And I don't typically add the male in again. Some people do to basically
reestablish.
Yeah, confirm, right. But once I get really one good lock and everything, and if the snakes are healthy, the diet's going really good, I like my fertility rate, even with one lock, is like the 95 percentile probably.
Nice. That's great to hear. Now, when it comes to, and I read this too online, and I think you might have told me this before, is like when you breed a smaller male, like a male like Jeff or my Arctic Conda, Nirvana, they eat only once every 2 weeks, and they're small males. I'm like talking 60, 62 grams, 65 grams. Now, are they better breeding partners, or is there a correlation there or causation? Is it, are smaller males better for breeding than maybe larger females like my Snowball? Snowball's around 80 grams right now. Have you witnessed that in your experience?
Well, when you say 60 grams, actually, I think that's a big male, in my opinion.
I mean, like talking about 52, 50, 78.
Yeah. So, but no, those are I think those are good, decent, size males. I don't think they're big males, but I think those are very good, appropriate size males. I really like when I pick out my male breeders. Actually with all my hogs, whether it's the females or males, I look at their body structure. I like to see proportion and their facial structure, so their eye size, the size of the rostral scale, the length of their head. And then for the males, I really like to look at the tails.
Yeah, Snowball has like a big head, man. He has like a big head, big eyes.
I like to look at males with really long tails, really long, thick tails. And I haven't seen two, I've told other people about that for a while. That's something I've been doing for a long time. But I've had some males that just kind of have average tails that end up being good breeders. But you'll notice too, if you have a male and as you're raising him, say he's only 6 months old, and then he's like a year old. If you look at his tail, you'll notice once they are around 2 years old, their tails kind of fill out, and you can see when they become really mature, and that's usually a good indication that hey, this male's he's going to be a good breeder. Most of them end up being good breeders once they get to the 2-year age mark, and that's the thing too. It's more of age for males. I've seen people breed 11, 12-month-old males, but it's the fertility rate on them can be bad, and it's kind of it's a little bit of a gamble because sometimes these young males, their fertility is bad, and a lot of times these young males also don't want to breed. But once your males get to 20 months plus old, they are pretty much mostly or all good breeders, and especially once they're 2 years old. But I like to pick out males with big long tails. I don't really see a big correlation with size. I have my smallest male I ever bred was around 35 grams, but he's 2.5 years old. And but a lot of my males now, one of the smallest males I bred last year, he may have been 45 grams, 40 grams. But a lot of my males are 50 to 80 grams. And actually my big males, they make pretty good breeders. But they got some age and they're very
that's what I was going to say, the correlation between age and size. So
yeah, it's more the maturity and stuff. I don't really see too much with size. I mean, I have some males that bred this past season. I didn't even weigh them, but my one really good breeder male, I'm sure he's 90 or 100 grams. I think there definitely is an issue though once you get males super, super big. I had a couple of giant males in the past, and they didn't make good breeders. And I don't have a lot of experience, even though I've been doing this for so long, with like oversized massive males. But you don't see too many oversized massive males. They're like not common.
So yeah, I'm like, when I got Jeff off of you, I think he's almost 2 years old right now. No, I think he's over 2 years old right now. And he's around, I think, 60 grams right now. And when I put him next to Rosie, I just published a video of them locking up. And did you see that video I sent you, or no? You didn't watch it yet?
Yeah, I see the video of them locking up. I didn't see
today, the one I just posted today.
Yeah, I didn't check that one out yet.
Okay.
I mean, when you were talking today, I was pretty much just handling messages, and then
I know you said you were swamped when you woke up.
Yeah, right into here.
Hey, by the way, Jeff, your hair looks good tonight, just so you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not all like slicked back and wet looking anymore.
I know I busted your balls last night about it.
No, I know. So a couple other people did. That was good. Yeah.
And you were patriotic last night, by the way. So it's good.
Thank you. Yeah, I was. I had the blue, red, white, everything. Red, white, and blue
shirt and red pants or shorts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about time you wore shorts. Next question I have for you is, okay, so we bring them out of brumation. You know, we're starting to feed our females. Like I fed Gal twice already. So I want to talk about the portions of food when you're feeding before pairing and maybe afterwards too. After the lockup, after they paired, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about supplements too as well. So Gal, when she came out of brumation, I waited about a week and 2 days, maybe like 8-9 days. And I fed her 2 small mice, not mediums like she usually takes. So what I did is, and I made a video about this last week when I first fed her, and she ate right away. I fed her 2 small mice, but I powdered one with calcium D3, gave it to her, boom, she ate it right away. I waited about 4 or 5 minutes, gave her another small mouse, not medium, small mouse. She ate it right away within like a minute or two. So I'm figuring to myself, listen, that might be more bone structure, more calcium for the female. Should we feed smaller portions to our females before and after, say, being locked up? You know, locking it up with a male. Should we keep on continuing with small portions, big portions, supplements? What do you recommend?
I'd supplement the whole entire time. And small, frequent meals are actually always better than large meals.
Okay.
I don't really ever like slam my females with really, really big meals. Every now and then I'll feed them up like pretty heavy once they're gravid.
And that's twice a week, right? Twice a week for females, you feed them like every 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, probably every 4 or 5 days.
You just want to feed them as much as they want to take before they start refusing food. They start going crazy, and they want that lay box, right?
Yeah, sometimes like most of my females will eat up until like a few days, you know, until they're like from laying. Usually, once they get close to laying, they don't eat. Like 3-4 days before they're laying. I've heard other people say theirs will eat up to the day they lay. I do have some like that, but generally I don't. You do have a slight chance. It seems like a higher chance of having females regurg if you feed them very close to laying, like within like a few days of them being like that their eggs are going to drop. Probably due to the contractions and the uncomfortability and the swelling, and then also contractions and all that. And again, in the wild, they're not going to be hunting for food when they're staging by their nesting site. Yeah. They're going to be preoccupied with digging out their nesting site and then staging right by it until they deposit their eggs. Once they deposit their eggs, right after that, then they're going to be game for eating for sure.
So what's a good indication on, or how many days after
the pre-lay shed?
Well, the pre-lay shed, of course, that's what I was getting to. Okay. Yeah, correct. Pre-lay shed. So after they do the pre-lay shed, I think it's like 5 to 10 days that they're going to lay the eggs, right? So you wait after the pre-lay shed, you wait like a day or two, and you put that box right in, right?
Usually I put the egg box in right while they're in shed just so they can explore it, and they'll usually use it to help shed their skin. And you can even leave it in year round, and then you're going to want to lay there, because that's like if you have it set up well, it's a very appropriate spot it's going to be the most appropriate spot, and instinctively for them to deposit their eggs. And the thing is, I always mark the pre-lay shed. The pre-lay shed is extremely important for keeping track of when they're most likely going to lay.
lay the egg, yeah. So
yeah, most of them are like 7 to 12 days. I've seen them a little sooner than that. Again, it's the temperature you're keeping them at. Last year, my room was very hot, and I was having a lot of females lay 7 and 8 days after their pre-shed because their metabolism was, more active due to the temps being a little higher. But a lot of times I'd have a lot of females that like lay 9, 10, 11 days after their pre-lay shedded. It can vary. I've seen one. The only time I've ever seen one lay like a day after a pre-lay shed, it was her triple. She actually had triple clutch.
Holy
and
crap.
I didn't even intend for her to triple clutch. I didn't try or anything.
Wow.
Her third clutch she laid one day after a pre-lay shed, which was very odd. It was very weird. It's very rare. I get females that lay 6 days after their pre-lay shed. Almost all of them are at least like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's very common.
Okay.
Uncommon is past 14 days. But then some people also confuse a shed cycle sometimes that actually coincides with a pre-lay shed. I've actually had females that they're bred and they're gravid and they shed and they go into shed shortly after, and I'm like, that's too quick for a pre-lay shed.
Yeah.
So then I'm feeding her up, and then she starts to go into shed like 12, 14 days after
What?
that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because
Good to
it's funny. I've seen that in, several times where a female's shed cycle, natural shed cycle, coincides with a pre-lay shed.
I was just ready to say,
yeah.
because I was looking at Rosie last night or this morning, and she's very dark. You know how they get dark before they start shedding? Like Rosie's getting really dark right now. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, she might be shedding soon. I actually had that thought this morning.
You might go into
when
shed
they were
and
locked
after
up.
they shed out. That's a good time to pair again. They're extremely receptive after they shed. And that's what people call like probably the ovulation shed. But at that point, I don't think they all have egg follicles stacked or built to be they're ready to be dropped in their oviduct and be fertilized. Right after they shed. Usually hognoses, they kind of develop egg follicles very quickly. Their bodies don't really wait. That's why a lot of times, sometimes people, will miss their hognose, and it's because if you have like say something like my leopard or fat tail geckos, they'll develop egg follicles, and those egg follicles will kind of stay, a certain size for a while, and they won't really mature much. And basically, that allows them a window to be bred by a male. So then they have sperm to come, for the egg follicles to then drop in the oviduct and become fertilized. But with hognose, a lot of times they'll just develop egg follicles, and if there's no males, like then they don't wait. So buses keeps moving. They'll just ovulate and they'll just deposit in fertiles. So that's why we want to pair fairly soon in a year after just like a couple meals, and once they're only slightly warmed up and everything, and and just keeping good records of everything. That's what I do, is keeping it organized really kind of helps you.
I've been writing all the dates down and everything, man. It's just been like, I'm very detailed. I'm like very detail oriented in general when it comes to my job and everything. So when it comes to breeding hognoses this year, I'm very detail oriented, especially the lockup today. I wrote down the lockup and the date and everything and the time. And so when it comes to after a lockup, say one-time lockup, I'm like, when do you expect the female to lay their eggs? Like, what's the time frame you think? Is there temperature involved? What do you think about that?
Well, temperature, it affects their metabolism a little bit. But at this point, when you're breeding them and you have your temps where you're at, like now, for instance, where you have like your hot spot, say like set at 86, even warming them up a little bit, it's just going to help for digesting meals a little quicker. Their metabolism isn't going to go up that rapidly. It's not like they're going to metabolize too much quicker. It's kind of like the females I said that when my room was really hot, they seemed to from ovulation to laying was about like 28, 29 days.
Oh, really? About a month, really?
Yeah, from the time of ovulation, because it'd be sometimes they're pretty easy to pinpoint their ovulation to laying.
From lockup, so let me get this straight. I'm sorry to cut you off. From lockup to ovulation is about a month, you're saying?
No.
Okay, I was just making sure. To make sure. I thought it was about 2 months, wasn't it?
No. Well, no, it really depends. I mean, you could breed a hognose and she could have no egg follicles, and after she's bred, she could develop egg follicles 2 weeks later, and then they could drop into her oviduct at that point. The ovulation cycle starts, and because she's storing the sperm, and then for that ovulation point, it's going to be about a month. That would be a month and a half. So it really depends where your female's at in the state of egg follicles. Early on in the season, like where you're pairing years, sometimes females can have egg follicles already developing. But in this case, most likely, on average, they're not. So I've actually brought up multiple females, from brumation, and I feed them like 2 or 3 times. And sometimes they don't want to breed right away. And sometimes I'll pair them, I lock them. And I don't really care too much, though, actually, about from lockup to laying, because, it really depends on the ovulation. And I can't always tell when they're going to be ovulating. It's like pretty much impossible unless you got like an ultrasound machine. And I don't think there's going to be any benefit to that at all.
But it's always better to, after brumation, like after 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks at the most, to try to get them paired up as much as possible, because, or lock up as quick as possible, right? Because they store the sperm, and that's going to be good for them. So when they do go into ovulation, the sperm is there, and you'll have a better chance of getting more eggs, better eggs.
And just pairing early and stuff, pairing can actually stimulate the female's hormonal responses and body to start developing egg follicles.
Okay.
The actual breeding. Stop calling me. The actual breeding.
You sure it's not me calling you?
Yeah, it's not.
By the way, Elena, we're going to get to questions here soon, so give us a little bit. Let's talk about this, and then we'll get to your questions. Sorry, Jeff. Sorry, bud.
No, that's okay. Yeah, but the whole thing, again, is like when you breed them, just a stimulation from the male can, cause the female to develop egg follicles, and the actual breeding and everything can stimulate the female's body to develop, egg follicles, and then once egg follicles are mature, they ovulate. But the thing is, I never really cared too much because, you can pair a female and then she can lay like a month after locking up. That means you nearly missed her. That means she had full egg follicles ready to rock pretty much. But if you're breeding a female and she laid in 2 months later, that means that when you bred her, she didn't have egg follicles at that time. And the egg follicles can be very tricky to find and even look for. I don't even suggest doing it because you'll actually end up messing up breeding even more so, because you can actually feel them developing. But the funny thing is, it feels like their follicle sizes can actually be different. I've actually felt slugs like where they're actually, the female's already ovulated and they're infertile, and they feel like egg follicles and everything, but they're actually slugs. The female actually had ovulated, but her infertile eggs are actually way smaller. And sometimes the infertile eggs still develop and grow a little bit. Sometimes they're like really, really small, like they're like the size of like marbles. And the egg follicles grow so rapidly. If you're constantly feeling for them, you're going to end up missing the female. So you really want to get them bred at the start or even before they really develop their egg follicles. So the thing is, really the important thing is to pair earlier, like we're talking about, like just a couple weeks out of brumation, hopefully getting a couple meals in the females. Not as important for the males. You could always too. It's like, I think it's definitely not as important to brumate your males as long as the females. You could always bring out your males 1 or 2 weeks early. If somebody's like, I'm going to brumate my males for like 6 weeks, I'd be totally fine with that. I'd rather brumate my females longer because they're the ones that kind of need to be more in tune. The males are going to want to breed the females if they're mature and everything. The brumation definitely puts their body more on track, but I don't think it's important for them to have as long of a time in brumation. I mean, you talked about that earlier. I think you could probably get away with brumating a lot of females at 6 to 5 weeks. But at certain times, it's going to get to a point where it's going to be such a short period of time where their bodies might not actually recognize it as a full, term brumation. And you might get some inconsistencies with your breedings, especially when you have such a short brumation window. Because the one thing is, when you're putting them in these brumation windows, you are putting them on a cycle. And that's the thing, because people ask me, can I breed them without brumating? I'm like, yeah, you can, but your success long-term is not going to be as good. So
and we're basically speeding up the process. We're basically speeding up the process with 2 months, right?
You're speeding up the process, but it's really because of the temperatures we're keeping them at. Again, in the wild, they're brumating sometimes 5, 6, like they'll brumate up north for at least 5 months.
And the temperature gradually gets higher and higher.
And the temperature gradually gets warmer, and there's the photo period that's slow. It's expanding and everything. And that's why I like having big windows in my rooms. I think that's a very big help. I really love having natural light come in.
It's
and
great.
All that. Yeah, but when you have these really short brumation windows that you're simulating in captivity, you have, I think, a way higher chance of them not breeding as consistently and not putting them on a schedule. Because I've had many people actually, where they're like, hey, I was getting ready to brumate my Hognose, and they actually went through, they actually developed slugs. And it's like, well, you had such a large window of them, not having brumation period. Because basically, say if you're only brumating for like say a month and a half, you're really only brumating for like 20%, of the actual full season. Meanwhile, in the wild, the experience is a lot longer. And then also when they're brumating too, if you see them in the wild, when they come out of brumation, they actually all shed. And so I think that's what a lot of people with hognose refer to it as ovulation shed. And really, it's not an ovulation shed. It's really just them develop their body replacing their cells, and they're being rejuvenated. And they had a long, rest and everything. But a lot of times too, there is some scale damage, especially with the ones in the wild. They're going to have some small blisters, maybe scale rot from being in moist, soil and everything down in those burrows for so long. But when they have that fresh shed cycle, their cells are all rejuvenated, and it's a really good time to. That's in the captivity one is a really good time to pair them, and that's when they're naturally going to start probably breeding in the wild too, because they've been warmed up for a little bit. Their bodies are starting to get going, their metabolism's going, and then they're slowly replacing all their cells from the damage and everything. It's mostly superficial damage, though it looks worse than it is, especially because by the shed after that, they usually look really clean. But anyhow, just the longer brumation temps seem to really put them in tune a lot better and keeps everything on schedule. And then the female instinctively, is very, ready to breed, opposed to just like a really short window where it kind of might even confuse the animal's natural instincts.
Well said. Nice rant there. Question: supplements when it comes to feeding your females after or before or after brumation, I should say. Calcium D3 I told you about that I'm using right now. Every feeding, every other feeding, what other supplements do you like using when it comes to your females, say after pairing up?
I do every feeding, every single feeding, and I like to use Osteoform SA, or I use Zoomed Calcium, and I use Vionate or Reptivite. I use Reptivite a lot. Zoomed has pretty good track record of supplements, and they do their own studies and stuff on their supplements, and they work really well. I like the Osteoform SA, though, as far as the balance with D3 in it. Zoomed Calcium, I'm sure, is equally as good. I just have a more like for Zoomed Calcium with D3, I don't like using it, say, like on leopard geckos, because leopard geckos are pretty sensitive to D3. So Osteoform SA for leopard geckos is better. And since I've worked with leopard geckos so long, and I see what Zoomed, because Zoomed Calcium with D3 is pretty strong, so I definitely steer away from that for say like a nocturnal species that's probably not needing or that's not getting like tons of D3 or needing as much. And then it really has to do, I kind of said that wrong, but it has a lot to do with how much the calcium the animals are consuming. Leopard geckos consume a lot of calcium. And so when they get an ample, like too much D3, they can actually get too much D3 from these supplements. So with hognose, I don't really, worry about that or see anything like that.
Well, they excrete it if they have too much calcium, right?
Yeah, they can. Leopard geckos, they can actually get D3 poisoning.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, they can get too much D3.
So can hognoses get too much or no?
They so it's like any other animal. They get like a lot through supplementation. They're going to store it in their fats. But if you use like Osteoform, that's a really good formula, and they're not going to get any D3 overdoses from that.
All right, cool. Let's take a 5-minute break, Jeff. I'm going to play some music in the background, guys. We got some questions. Elena, we will get to your questions here in a couple minutes here. Great questions, actually. Guys, if you have any questions, just pile them up, and I will get to them. I will definitely see them. And we're going to come back with, we're going to talk about prepping our females with the lay box, the substrate we're going to use, humidity, temperatures. We're going to get into that, Jeff. And also when it comes to laying eggs, the time frame between the lay box, laying eggs, incubation, temperatures. We're going to talk about that at the end here. And then, guys, we're going to do your Q&As here after that. So, Jeff, take a 5-minute break. I don't know if you have to check on any. I got to check on Snowball and right now, see if they're locked up. And, guys, we'll be back here in a couple of minutes. Give us like 5 minutes, and we will be right back.
Suicide? Suicide? Suicide?
Oh man, this music reminds me of my DJ club nights, man. It's crazy.
DJ club nights, huh?
Dude, I used to DJ nightclubs for 15 years from Philadelphia, New Jersey, all the way up to New York City, Limelight, New York City. I was a resident DJ at Limelight, New York City from 1999 2001 before they closed down. Main room DJ.
Who's your favorite DJ?
Me.
Many? Okay.
Me.
Who is? I don't know who that is. Oh, you said me.
Me, Jeff. Me.
Me. I thought I thought it was like DJs have like weird stage names. I thought you were saying like they.
No. I DJed nightclubs for 15 years.
You're your favorite DJ. Well, there's like that DJ Khaled guy. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
back in the day, dude, I was a pretty famous DJ back in the 90s, late 90s, early 90s, or mid 90s up to.
You ever still do it?
Nah, dude. No, I've had a lot of my fans that used to follow me from Philadelphia all the way up to New York. And I've probably had in the last 10 years, maybe 6, 7 people ask me to DJ their wedding with the same music that I used to DJ. I'm like,
okay.
No. I don't have the equipment. I can't do it. No way. So, all right. enough about me. Jeff, I just recently purchased sphagnum moss for my lay box and vermiculite for my eggs. All right, let's talk about that. All right, we already talked about coming out of brumation. We already talked about feeding your females, what to feed them, small portions, the supplements. We talked about that. We talked about the ovulation cycle. Great, beautiful information, wealth of knowledge from you. You're a legend. Let's talk about, okay, the eggs are being laid right now, okay? Lay box, what do you recommend when it comes to that? Do we get the sphagnum moss? Do we use sphagnum moss? Do we soak it, rinse it out really good, put it in there, maybe like a day after ovulation shed? What do you recommend when it comes to preparing the female to lay the eggs?
Well, again, I put the egg box in, like right before they go in the shed or right as they're in shed. And I showed them the one time on the other podcast, but I like to use ones as large as possible that you can even take up half your enclosure if you want. I put a hole on the top, a little bigger than, the diameter of the female. You don't want it to be too big, just because it's like, dry out. You can always add water, so it's not that big of a deal if your hole on the top is a little on the large side.
So a nice size Tupperware ball with a hole in the top, right?
Yeah, do the hole on the top. If you do it on the side, the snake's going to push all the substrate completely out of there. It's all going to be gone. It's going to be everywhere.
So you put the hole in the middle, right?
Yeah, it could be in the middle or it could be off to the one side as long as it's on the top.
Little offset. Okay, got you.
Yeah, and I like to replicate loam, because that's again their natural habitat. The soil there it's loam, it's loamy soil. Sometimes the sand content's higher in other areas, but overall it's very loamy, soft soil. And loam's comprised of silt, sand, clay, topsoil, it's sand and everything. So I really just use coco coir, and I use about 10% sand ratio, and that replicates it pretty well. Sometimes I add excavator clay, but you could even do sphagnum moss as long as it's moist and it's a nice secluded area and something that they can dig around in. They really like that. They'll dig pretty deep. It's kind of hard to give them an egg box that they feel like they can explore it. I'm trying to think of the way to word it. They just dig so deep. I've actually gave some before where I actually moved them to a whole other enclosure just to see, and would give them substrate that was 6-7 inches deep, and they would dig down all the way to the bottom. They really root around in there. So when I put in my egg boxes, I try to make them as deep as possible, but they will still always dig down to the bottom. But they really like to make a pretty big nest cavity. So just to have something where they can really till around in is nice. But I actually used coco coir mixed with the sphagnum moss. I like that. It makes it nice and fluffy, and that works really well.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I got sphagnum moss. Do you think maybe a mixture of vermiculite on the bottom and sphagnum moss, and just put some nice water in there, rinse it out really good, where it's not soaking, and just put it on the bottom and put sphagnum moss up top, maybe? Is that a good idea?
Yeah. Well, if I was to do sphagnum moss, I've done sphagnum moss. Actually, I have a video from a couple of years with one. It's all coco coir and sphagnum moss. I like the coco coir and sphagnum moss mix.
Not the coco coir I used.
Yeah, the sphagnum moss
mine was too
expands
thick.
And everything, and it's kind of fluffy. And so if you put coco coir in there, see, if you fill coco coir all the way up to the brim, they'll find a way. They'll excavate it out and everything. But when you put the sphagnum moss in there, it kind of stays nice and puffy, and it fills it up, and so it stays at kind of near the top. They will churn it up and stuff, but it kind of gives the container, a nice kind of full feeling, but still a lot of ample room for them to move around a lot in it, because it kind of squishes down and everything because it's fluffy.
Gotcha. Sorry.
And I think any of those too. I think as long as you have a nest box that has moist substrate that they feel secure in. And I think you could do that with, easy with sphagnum moss or coco coir, a mix of the two. You can even, again, I do sand, a little bit of sand mixed in with the coco coir.
So I can use the calcium sand. So I can use the calcium sand I was using, right?
You can use that. Just use a small bit.
Just a little bit, just maybe 2% on the
crushed
bottom.
Limestone? It's like crushed limestone?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's calcium crushed. Yeah, it's really fine. Really fine.
I guess you could use that.
Just put on bottom, maybe some Coca-Cola, maybe some, vermiculite, sphagnum moss mixed in.
Oh,
Fucking
you
mix it all
sand,
up.
man. I keep saying sand, and you keep asking. You want me to say vermiculite? You want me to say vermiculite?
I'm like, so I got Josh
Fine.
Frog's vermiculite, whatever that is. I'm like,
You
I got
can
here.
use it. If I use vermiculite, I'd mix it with Coca-Cola.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Yeah.
That's what
that.
I would do.
All right, so
Yeah.
let's talk about putting the lay box in. Say, okay, I'm using terrariums right now, so I will put the lay box on the worm side. What's the humidity? Where does it need to be? And what's the temperature for the female to lay the eggs?
Now, well, the one thing is hognose. They naturally in the wild, they're going to lay their eggs much like a turtle is going to. They're going to find it in an embankment that probably is like a south slope that has a north, or that's like getting the northern sun hitting it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the thing is, like, they're going to look for these areas that are going to be getting the proper like temperature and everything. So, if there is like say a spot on an embankment and everything that gets sun, that's going to be a good spot for them to potentially lay. So they're going to go into digging around like probably cavities or anything like that, or next to tufts of grass, and they're going to look for these like secluded areas that are still getting some sunlight, that are staying warm enough that the eggs are going to be able to incubate. But the thing is, so like in captivity, if you have the egg box on the hot spot, it's too hot, they may want to lay there, and I kind of like credit that to them finding spots in the wild that get sunlight on these like hillsides, these embankments. So the one thing is you want to make sure your temperatures aren't too hot, because if you say your hot spot's like 90 some degrees, or even like around like 89, 90, you might potentially damage those eggs when they're laid. You could actually overheat those eggs.
All right, so I'm a
the thing I do is you can just lower your temperature.
Yeah,
you can just lower your temperature to like 86 degrees. But I like to put the egg box near the heat tape. So when the heat tape's coming up, like the hot spot, the heat's coming up through the bottom there, it's not really hitting the entire tub. It's hitting kind of a little bit of the one side. But usually my room temp at that time, my ambient temp's like 80. So realistically, the temperature throughout their entire enclosure is a good temperature for them to lay their eggs. So it's more about just the substrate, the moisture there, and then not so much the temperature. But sometimes we'll prefer to dig out the one side and lay them near the warmer side of the enclosure. And then sometimes we'll lay them on the other side. So I don't see like a big difference in that. But if you have like a lower ambient temperature, say like 73 degrees or 75 degrees, and then you have your hot spot in your enclosure and your egg box is kind of staggered above that hot spot where it's like kind of, say 1/4 on it.
That's what exactly I was going to say to you is like,
if I'm going to dig out and lay near that warm side. So you kind of just want to make sure that if you do that, your warm spot is like, and not in excess of like probably 87 degrees.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say to you is like, if we get the, good sized Tupperware and we put the whole like offset a little bit to the center, you don't want it right underneath the heat lamp if you're using a terrarium. You just want to offset that a little bit where maybe if you do an infrared, maybe 78, 79 degrees, and the warm side of that lay box might be 84, 85, 86, or you could do a little bit warmer. Just move it, offset it to the heat lamp and maybe even if you're using a heating pad, just make sure it's not on the heating pad, but just maybe a quarter way on the heating pad. Right?
Yeah. If you have a basket light in too, you can always just get like a little like temp gun, and then just kind of read the temperatures inside.
Yeah, I always use a temp gun, man.
Yeah, I always have little temp guns laying around, and they're very useful and everything. So
yeah, guys. By the way, if the stream's cutting out, I don't know why. I think it's the bit rate, but it's YouTube. Sometimes it keeps on cutting out. Just refresh, and you should be fine. So sorry about that, guys. We keep on getting like 14, 18 people in here, and it goes down to 9 and back up to 18. It's just like. It just keeps on cutting out. I don't know why. It's YouTube. When you do live streams, I don't know why, but it's just stupid. Sorry about that, Jeff. But yeah, just have a medium where the temperatures are pretty decent and just like not right underneath the heat lamp. If you're going to do that, make sure it's a pretty good temperature. So when it comes to your female laying the eggs, what's a good temperature in that lay box for the eggs before you of course, take them out and put them in the incubator. So what's a good medium there when it comes to temperature for the eggs being laid by the female for maybe a day or two?
When they're first laid, they're actually very tolerant to like temperatures, except for extreme cold or extreme heat. I know that sounds obvious, but they're more sensitive to heat than they are. Say if they're laid and it's like 73 degrees where they laid them, that's fine. They'll be fine like that for a whole day. It's actually, I've seen it with like African and fat-tailed gecko eggs. Fat-tailed gecko eggs killing points like 82 degrees, like going underneath, like going lower than 82. They are very sensitive to cool temps. They're eggs. But I had eggs laid one time, and I was out of town, and they were told to I told the person, hey, if I'm gone these late, put them here, and they put them on the table in the one room where it's like 73 degrees, and they were there for 2 days when they were first laid. And I was like, I thought these were definitely shot. It may have been like 75, 76 at the warmest. Well, I'll put them in the incubator, and they were fine. A lot of times when their eggs are first deposited, the temperature isn't that important. As far as it just being like a moderate low temp. So if your hognose lay their eggs and it's like in the 70s or like, lower mid 80s, that's fine. But typically the egg boxes, it should be around like 80 degrees, somewhere in the low 80s, high 70s is fine. If they even laid them in a spot that's like, the eggs are going to be okay. I've actually had hognose eggs that I incubate. I had, the coolest I ever had hognose eggs drop down to was like 76. I know that's not going to affect them in any way.
So when they lay the eggs, when do you take them out? Usually after she's done, or you can take them out as she lays them? Should you wait 12 hours a day?
As they're laying. Yeah. Sometimes we'll eat their eggs.
Yeah, I've heard that too as well.
Yeah. I've kind of seen a correlation between them feeling like their nesting site's been disturbed and them being more likely to eat their eggs. Mm-hmm. So the less you disturb them and the more secluded they are, the actually less likely they are to lay the eggs. But in order to do that, you'd have to not check them often. And so if you do that, there's a chance that they could eat their eggs, because then you're waiting just for the female to see her appear and she's, no longer carrying eggs.
So there's a medium there. You got to watch. Yeah.
Well, it's a catch-22. Yeah. I say check them all the time.
Okay.
But you're going to do that disturbance. You're actually conditioning them to make them more likely to instinctively want to eat their eggs because they feel like their nest site's been compromised. That's what I've witnessed, because I've had females that laid eggs,
makes sense.
Actually buried them completely, pushed all the dirt. Like, these were good moms. Like, instinctively, they did everything right. They laid their eggs and they pushed all the soil over them like perfectly, made them really deep, and it was like kind of like a big slope. And I'm like, man, that looks good. That just looks like kind of like reminds me of like a turtle nest. Yeah. And anyhow, I've done this a few times. I'm going to get a picture of this. I'm going to get a video of this, put it on my Instagram. This happened like 4 or 5 years ago. This happened multiple times. The female had buried all of her eggs. She was ignoring the spot. She was done. I disturb her. She's getting like a little defensive. Sometimes they're not that defensive, but they look a little put off. I go and get my phone. I come back. She's digging and putting her face straight down there and putting her face right in the eggs, going there to eat them. And she was completely disinterested. And it was until they were disturbed that I've witnessed this kind of behavior a few times. So that indicates that there's definitely a correlation between them eating their eggs and actually nest site disturbance. But the thing is, you have to disturb them to make
it. So it's 22, right?
22.
Yeah.
So you really want to be checking on them often. Most females lay in the morning. Yeah, I've had them lay throughout any period of the day, but the most commonly females are laying eggs in of course they're females. They're laying in the morning. I get a lot of like girls that they start laying and everything around like 7, 8, 9, 10 a.m. That's the most common time frames for them to start depositing their eggs. They shed, and to have a pretty good idea, check them at least like once or twice. When they first have their pre-lay shed, I'm only checking them like once a day at most.
All right, we should be good now. I just had to redo the bit rate. Bit rate I think was a little too high. 8,000. I had to lower it to. There we go. We're good now. All right, guys. All right, Chad. I just refresh if need be. Refresh. So I lowered the bit rate to 6,500 or 7,500 was at 8,000. I think YouTube didn't like that. So the stream from here on out should be pretty smooth. So just refresh if need be. All right. So okay, we talked about laying the eggs, this and that. So what's the time period? Oh, okay, incubation. So what do you use? I know you bury your eggs when it comes to putting your eggs in egg boxes. Now, do you use tubs? Do you use a lid? Do you drill holes? And what's the temperature you keep your eggs at? And how long does it take for them to hatch?
It depends on the temperature you're incubating them at for how long it takes them to hatch. The higher the temperature, faster the embryo develops and metabolizes. The lower temperature, the longer it takes. I like to incubate around like 80 to 82 degrees, and that's kind of like a more moderate, kind of temperature there. Around like 80, 81, 82, they're going to take like usually in a high 50-day range to hatch. Around 80, maybe like up to around 60 days. And I like to incubate, and guess what? Coco coir, sometimes mixed with a little bit of sand. And I just put them in Tupperware containers. I usually like the Sterilite ones that are for just Tupperware containers for storing food that are like, I forget how big like the quart size they are. They're like
6 quarts, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. They might be 4 or 6 quarts or something like that. And I put just 2 little air holes in there. You don't need a lot of ventilation because, again, it's in a pretty big area. And
air holes in the top or the side?
On the side, just usually about the diameter of a toothpick. Usually 2 air holes. I don't want just something I'm going to have to add water to a lot of times.
You want the humidity to stay in there and keep the eggs nice.
Yeah, you want the humidity to stay there. When they lay in the wild, they bury these in this moist substrate, and they're completely buried, like a few inches underground. And there's the ventilation is through the the well drained loose soil and just the air that can permeate down there, which is very, very little. But they don't need a lot of that's some people put them in bigger containers and they have all this ventilation, and it's like these things aren't like needing this ample amount of free flowing air. That's not what they get in the wild. Nothing close to it.
And you bury your eggs, you said, right?
Yeah, I bury them. I usually just kind of you can leave them like partially exposed, but I usually like to put like a thin layer over them just in case there's any condensation that forms that drips down. It'll drip right down to the substrate and not hit the actual egg. A couple drops hit your actual egg. It's not going to do anything, but I just do it just as just precautionary.
And how long you think? You said 80 82 degrees, right? So
yeah, 80 82 degrees.
50 days? Around?
Yeah, high 50 days. Like at that point, like 82, 83, you're going to see them hatching around more like the low 50s, mid 50s, like 52 to 55 days.
Okay.
If you incubate, stay at like 86, 87 degrees, you're going to see like 48, 47 days. But I don't really usually incubate that warm. The warmest I've ever incubated at was like 85, and then near the end it got up to like 87. I don't even know the killing point of hognose eggs. I don't know what the actual cutoff is. I'd assume it's in the low 90s.
So when the babies hatch, do you put them all together in one tub for maybe a day or two, or
I keep them all together until they shed out. Actually, that's
so you wait till the first shed. Okay.
They all shed within hours, so like a day after they hatch. So you can separate them after that. A lot of times I keep them in a few days just together before I set them up. And some people, I used to do this a lot when I was in my teens. I'd actually feed them together. I'd actually keep them in that container for like about a week and then offer them food all together. And actually, when you did that, you had a really high success for feeding responses because they're familiarized with the, site where they hatched, and they also have like just all the familiar scents. They're in like a small little box and everything. And, with the coco coir and, if you have it like near, like say on some heat tape, they have a really good thermal gradient area and everything. So they're very comfortable, and it's a very easy way to get them to eat very successfully. The problem is then you got to watch them all as they're eating all together, and then you can't babysit them. And they're actually such strong feeding responses like that. A lot of times they'll try chewing on each other maybe the next day, and you don't want that to happen. Yeah, so the thing is they got to be separated, And if you want to keep that consistent comfortability with them eating, and one thing I used to do too is I'd feed them their first meals like that, then separate them. And that was like a little more successful than just setting them up all in new individual enclosures. But I just set them up all in new individual enclosures now. That's just the best method, especially if you have a lot of babies. Feeding them together as babies, again, you have to babysit them, and you can't be there 24/7. So I don't think it's a good idea. I used to do it all the time.
Yeah, great information, Jeff. All right, guys, let's get on to the Q&A. I know YouTube's really screwing up right now. It's going from like 18, 16, 3 viewers down. It's just really screwing up right now. It's really It's like really bad. I don't know why. I think it's YouTube. It's not me because I lowered my bit rate. I've been doing this for like 10, 15 years, guys, hosting live streams. And I know it's not on my end, but we do have a handful of questions. Well, actually, a lot of questions. Well, maybe about 6 questions. The first one is from Elena. She asked, LOL, female humans are known to vomit What's this? Female humans are known to vomit prior to birth. Do hognoses do this?
Yeah, I kind of stated that. If you feed too close to them laying their eggs, sometimes you'll see actually an uptick in females that are healthy that regurge. That's like a lot of the females don't even want to eat like a few days before laying. So say after they had their pre-lay shed and it's like 5 days post their pre-lay shed, I'm not going to offer them a meal. Every now and then, if you do, you want it to be small. But when I would have females that would eat very close to laying, like say 3 or 4 days out from them going into contraction or, just their eggs dropping and for them to, deposit them, if they had a meal in their stomach, they're more likely to regurge. Now, when they're gravid, no, it's very rare that they should be regurgitating. But when it gets close to them laying, like very close, it's still kind of rare, but it's definitely more likely to happen because if I have feedings, because I do have some, because I want to keep food up on them as much as possible. Yeah. Plus, you don't want them to, have a lot of empty space in their stomach and be hungry too after laying, because then that's going to increase the probability that they eat their eggs. But a lot of females, again, just a couple of days, 2-3 days before they're laying, they don't naturally want to eat. And sometimes I get some to eat, and most of them digest the meals fine, but you'll get ones every now and then that will regurge. And it's because of that. But once they're done laying and then they, recoup and everything, usually they actually bounce back really quick. A lot of my females, after they lay, I feed them the same exact day. And I've had a lot of females, 2 weeks after they're done laying, 3 weeks, their body weight's back to normal or close to normal. They look normal. They look good.
And double clutching, how long does that take after if they do double clutch after laying?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too is why you want to keep food on them. They double clutch. Generally, they ovulate. They have a set of egg follicles that are growing, and as soon as they deposit their first clutch, they're usually ovulating days after that. And so a lot of times you're 30, 31, 32 days after their first clutch. So a lot of times it's first clutch says June 30th. Second clutch is probably going to be July 30, 31st, August 1st, August 2nd, something like that.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Yeah, that's why a lot of them won't even let the male breed when you introduce them for a second clutch. A lot of times they retain enough sperm and they're already going through the ovulation process, and so they don't need to be bred. So a lot of times you'll see them they'll ignore the male and not even be receptive.
Not be receptive, yeah. All right, next question from Elena. Can we talk about what we can do as breeders to prevent egg binding, especially if a female or in a female that has a history of quality laying, but one incident of binding or treating egg binding once noticed?
Well, I think that's one thing that a supplementation helps with. I think with ample calcium and nutrients, it's less likely for them to have egg binding. Also, the size of the female. Actually, I noticed more probably large females get egg binding. You can have opposite ends of the spectrum. Female that's really small, females that are really large. This past season, I had no egg binding. I only had one case of egg binding that was kind of bad, and it ended up resolving. I had a couple other instances. This is where the female had one egg right by her cloaca that she wasn't quite able to pass due to it being large and her being a little tired. But they were able to be assisted and pushed out or laid a few days later. Had one where I just kept, give her food and water and she passed it herself a week later. But those are not even really, it is egg binding, but not exactly. It's just one egg down at the end of the female's oviduct. Yeah, it's right near the vent. And sometimes when you try to push them out, if it's a little twisted up in there, you might accidentally push out some of the oviduct. So a lot of times I'll just
massage it out.
Massage them, and sometimes just keep them, food with nutrient. And I give them, Pedialyte, stuff like that. Definitely give them electrolytes. I use the duckling chick.
Yeah, I seen that you use that. Yeah.
Yeah, I use that electrolytes
that's
a lot.
Good, yeah.
A lot of things are formulated for birds will work with reptiles very well too. And I really like the duckling chick, the vitamin mineral electrolyte mix. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So if you do have egg binding, it's actually pretty good to feed your female and also use the electrolyte.
Yeah, no, there's different types of egg
that
binding.
helps
There's
a little bit.
There's these minimal cases. Then you have these ones where the female's like spine showing and there's like a whole lot of eggs there and they're all like bunched up. Now, in those cases, sometimes you can assist them out, and other times your snake might need surgery in these severe cases. This past season, though, out of like, because I bred my females in 2 separate waves, and I think, no, not all of them produced. Most of them did, but out of like around like 140 females that did lay eggs, I only had one kind of bad case of egg binding. And the one thing I kind of really contributed to is a lot of supplementation.
Supplements, yeah, I was just very saying.
I always put their faces in water, make sure they're drinking, getting a lot of fluids, and then really to keep the females appropriate sizes. I have a lot of like 180 to 250 gram females. That's like the size. I mean, that's how big they are. Like that's actually bigger than what most females are in the wild that are breeding, especially once you get into this 200 gram territory. So when you get these females that are unnaturally big, the one thing too that can be a byproduct of that is they're producing a lot of eggs, and or even just really large eggs, and that could be in part due to just the size of the female, and then a lot of the nutrients. And so then the animal's producing like a whole bunch of eggs that their body is not really accustomed to. But I think it has more to do with size, because again, I've had some like pretty small females that produce very nice sized clutches, and they don't have any issues with them. My egg binding rate was extraordinarily low this season, and I contributed mostly to the females being the minimum of 2 years old, nice and mature, at least 2, also like 2.5, and then also appropriate size females that are lean. They're not like, overly fed all the time. My females, like, that's one thing too I tell people. They want to keep like a lot of hognose, and it makes sense, but once you kind of think about it, it also makes sense why you shouldn't be doing that. They want to keep their hognose on a feeding schedule as if their hognose is a baby still. Like they're like, oh, you're feeding your babies and your juveniles and your subadults like every 5 days. And it's like, well, your adult, their metabolism's slowing way down. They shouldn't be eating the same amount. And in the wild, they're not eating anywhere as close to the amount of food as we offer them in captivity. Once my female hognose gain all of their weight back and they look good, they have a nice filled out body, but they're kind of lean. I'm feeding them like every 2 weeks.
That's where I'm at right now. My females, or at least my younger females, my subadults right now, which are around 140 to 180 right now, my subadults, and I've been feeding them like 10, 14 days. That's it.
That's good. So you want to
and it's smaller meals too, not big meals either, man. And you know what? It seems like they react better to it. They're more healthy. They're more active, it seems like, and they're not like, in their hides all day long. And, they're responding very well to smaller meals and not as often. Like I said, 10, 12 to 14 days, I've been doing it. And you know what? It's been working very well, because when they were around 60, 70 grams, I was feeding them once a week, 7, 8 days. And I just noticed as they're getting older, it seems like their metabolism is slowing down a little bit more. So I increased the days of feeding them, or decreased to like I said, 12 to 14 days, 10 to 14 days. And you know what? They're responding incredibly well to it, and I'm loving it. So, but you don't want to pump your females up too quick. I hear people, I feed them every 6 to 7 days, your females, until they hit 200 grams. I'm like, I don't know about that, dude. You know what I mean? I think you're trying to rush something. You know what I mean? Because in the wild, like you said, they don't feed as often as we feed them. So.
No, and sometimes they do, but it's for really short spurts. That's the thing. It's very inconsistent in the wild.
If the opportunity is there, they're going to eat, right? So.
Right, exactly.
Next question by Trin Murray. How long after, I think we already answered this, or you answered it. How long after pre-shed until the female lays eggs? I think you already answered that, right?
We talked about that, but that's like, again, we're looking at the average times are like really 8, 9, 10, 11 days. And you'll have some that lay like, I had ones this year that laid 7 days after their pre-lay shed, especially the ones at the higher temp. I was getting some at like 7. And so that's really when I really start to expect eggs, is usually, starting at that time frame where I really start, watching them. But it's really common to have like 8, 9, 10 days where the female's laying after their pre-lay shed. So, but it could be. I've seen them like I've had females that lay perfect clutches like 14 days after their pre-lay shed. Usually, once you go past 14 days, though, it's unlikely. Usually, there's a problem if it is in fact the pre-lay shed. So sometimes I've seen where like I've had females where they go past 14 days, and other people are telling me, I'm like, yeah, it's probably more than likely they're going to be infertile. Or I had one female that deposited eggs that actually appeared like they were all good at one point. They all looked like they had embryos, but the eggs were retained in her for a while longer for whatever reason, and they never dropped. So it wasn't like she didn't act like she had binding, and didn't look like she had binding. And she laid them at when they did drop, but it was like 16, 17 days after the pre-lay shed, but they were all bad. They basically looked like they were deprived of oxygen, and for some reason they just didn't drop at the appropriate time, or just weren't deposited. They're quirky. You see weird things like that with them sometimes, though.
Yeah, shame.
Don't have like a full explanation as to why.
Yeah. All right, last question here we have. I think it's the last question. John Rice mentioned the larger bins helped his snakes to not egg bind. What is your technique to reduce egg binding, I guess, if any?
Well, the supplementing, and then keeping up their hydration and stuff too. So I mean, John C's tubs I use. I mean, for my adult females, most of my tubs are like 27.5 inches long. So most of my hognose aren't exceeding 28 inches, my females. So they do get, they expand out. I don't know if I've seen a correlation between the large size of a tub and a smaller tub. Not having the hognose have egg binding, but I do like to have a large egg box and everything.
Okay. Great answer. Dude.
But I don't really have anything to compare that to, so I don't know.
Trent Murray said, thank you. Getting the holes in my notes filled in from yesterday. Great. All right, Jeff. Great chat, man. I definitely learned a lot from you tonight, which is good, so I won't have to bother you that much.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm glad John joined too. I wonder if he's still here. Hey, John.
Yeah. Guys, go check out Jeff Galewood over at JMG Reptile on Instagram. That's where he's most active. If you have any questions for him, he's very active and he answers a lot of questions through DM. Right, Jeff? I knew before we started the stream, you were like, Joe, I just woke up. I'm answering all these questions. I got a lot of DMs.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I got to check at time. I had to respond to a lot because I did not sleep last night. So then I had to sleep a little bit during the day. And so I woke up, there's like all kinds of messages and missed phone calls and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's what I told you, man.
Not all at once.
Yeah, I was up all last night, like every 2 hours, just checking on the two pairs. And finally, we got the one that locked up. By the way, guys, I just posted a new video a couple hours ago of Rosie and Jeff locking up and their interaction. And it's just freaking amazing. So check out that video. And thanks, Jeff, dude. I do appreciate it. Check Jeff over at Instagram, GMG Reptile. The link is actually down below in the description box on this live video, guys. And Jeff, thank you very much, man. It's my third interview, I think, with you. And you're a wealth of knowledge. You're a legend when it comes to hog noses and breeding and raising. And, man, I appreciate you coming by tonight for about an hour and a half, man. I do appreciate it, man. You're the best.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe.
So any parting words, Jeff?
No, I'm pretty tired today.
I know, dude. Yeah, I only got a little like 1 hour nap, 2 hour nap, man. So I'm like hurting myself, man. So I'm just gonna check on Gal and Snowball, see what they're doing because it's been like a day now with them, and it's gonna be their second night. By the way, what do you think about them if they're not pairing up? I'm like they're still interested. Should I like take them out after tomorrow if they're not pairing up or locking up? Should I just split them up for 3 days and try again?
Yeah, that's what I do. Just give if they're not locking up, I separate them, give them each a meal if they are eating, and then
Gal's eating really good. Snowball hasn't eaten yet, so
yeah, for him it does. Like we talked about, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
especially if he's got good weight.
Yeah, he has great weight. Yeah, so maybe if that doesn't happen, I'll try. I'll separate them tomorrow morning and give them food and just try again in 3 days. All right, Jeff. Thanks for your time, dude. I appreciate it, man. And I'm looking forward to your next live feeding video on Instagram, dude. They're very fun, man. I really do like watching them. So, all right, guys. Thank you very much for showing up. Hopefully, you guys learned a few things, especially to your new breeders out there. And Jeff, thank you very much. You're a legend. Decades of doing this, and I appreciate your expertise and joining me. And bestowing to us your wealth of knowledge when it comes to hognose snakes and breeding, man. I definitely appreciate it, bro.
I'll try to help out. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I think I have pretty good understanding.
Decades doing it, bro, and you've been doing this since your early teens, man. So, yeah, you do have a wealth of knowledge, dude, and you have a high success rate, man. So, I do appreciate it, man. All right, guys, you have a great night. I'll see you in the next video. This is Joe from Hog-n-out. I'm out. Cheers.
All right.